Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. And for this, joining us live on Children's Day, Changana and Arirang. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening.
You guys remember your children's days?
A bit.
You do? Well, I guess you guys are young enough that children... Because I never experienced really Children's Day because, I immigrated to the U.S. when I was like 5 years old. But what are you supposed to do? Eat jjajangmyeon or something? Is that what you guys do? No?
No, I don't think so.
From my parents.
What?
Toys, dolls. Toys.
Oh, toys and dolls is what you get.
And then you go to like amusement parks with your parents.
Ah, that's right. I heard, I seen pictures of Everland today, completely empty because it was raining a lot. But still, a lot of people have been indoors. Maybe we'll talk about how the Children's Day was like on this Friday, on a rainy Friday, by the way, later in our program. But first, we're going to start off. It's going to be a very busy weekend here in Korea. The reason for that is because Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has decided he is going to come to Seoul on Sunday. We now have the summit between President Yoon and Prime Minister Kishida. This is going to take place at the presidential office again Sunday, May 7th, with agendas including security, high-tech industries, science and technology, youth and cultural cooperation. So much to be discussed here. We're going to start things off with Hanag telling us about Kishida and his itinerary during this visit. What do you have for us?
Okay, so to briefly go around the schedules of Kishida during his visit, President Yoon and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida are scheduled to hold a series of expanded talks on the first day of Kishida's visit, with a small group of staff members present, followed by a joint press conference. A dinner attended by President Yoon, First Lady Kim Gon-hee, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and his wife Yuko Kishida is also reportedly being coordinated to be held at the presidential residence in Hannam-dong on the same day. The dinner invitation is seen as a way to show President Yoon's willingness to resume the bilateral relations between South Korea and Japan. Prior to the meeting, Kishida will visit the Seoul National Cemetery, which is also called 국립현충원 in Korean, as his first gesture to restore the so-called shuttle diplomacy in 12 years. It will be the first time in 12 years that a sitting Japanese prime minister visited the Seoul National Cemetery since Yoshihiko Noda, then Japanese prime minister, who visited on October 19th, 2011.
Now, like you mentioned, certainly a lot of agendas in line for the talks between the two countries here, but with so many issues piled up for just the two countries to resolve so that they can, really put their long-string bilateral ties back on track. Some of the agendas are, let's face it, they're going to receive more attention than others. So what is expected to be the outcome of the upcoming summit?
So the leaders of South Korea and Japan are expected to announce concrete measures to build a new cooperative relationship on various fronts, as you've mentioned, including security, economy, culture, and people-to-people exchanges to keep the momentum going after the Tokyo summit. It is expected that both Yoon and Kishida will emphasize a unified response among South Korea, Japan, and the United States against North Korea's escalating nuclear threats. Nevertheless, a joint declaration is not expected to be issued at the summit. While the summit is expected to make mention of promoting youth and student exchanges, it is unlikely to announce the establishment of a separate government-led youth investment fund. Also, the issue of discharging radioactive water from the Fukushima nuclear plant is likely to be one of the agendas on the table. The South Korean government views that a scientific investigation, in addition to the ongoing IAEA monitoring, is needed to verify the safety of the Fukushima nuclear plant's wastewater discharge plan. An official of the presidential office said that it is unclear at present how the agendas will be concluded because we haven't finished the discussion yet. But if it is an important issue, we don't need to take it off the table. However, on the issue of importing agricultural and fisheries products from Fukushima, which is one of the major issues that Japan has been demanding time and time again, the presidential office seems to have drawn a line in the sand. In addition, Prime Minister Kishida's response and views on the thorny historical conflicts will also be of keen interest.
Yeah, there is a limit to what, even with the Yoon administration. The Yoon administration has been tailoring to whatever Japan's needs were, demands were so far. We've seen that with the forced labor issues, but at least when it comes to the export of the seafood from the Fukushima, they've still made it clear, right? They said no. We can't mess with that yet. And if there is a high chance that if they do decide, let's say, lift the ban of imports of Fukushima seafood and agriculture, we're going to see the approval rating dip down, because even here in Korea, no matter what it be, a conservative person or a progressive person, they're not a big fan of the contaminated water being released into the ocean, and then ultimately going to affect all of us in the coast of South Korea as well. And speaking of which, now, President Yoon really needs to balance this correctly. Now, there are some people saying that, let's face it, the Yoon administration and President Yoon, at least the way that he's been dealing with the Fukushima wastewater issue has been a little bit more lenient than the previous administration, right? And we've even seen, for example, some of the main opposition Democratic Party lawmakers head over to Fukushima, which, I mean, Japan is like, I mean, we're not going to give you any information. I don't know why you guys are here. You guys aren't even the ruling party. So didn't really look good. But at least when it comes to the Yoon administration, although they said that they're not going to import any of the Fukushima seafood and the agriculture, there is some consensus that maybe they're going to give some leeway and be a little bit less aggressive and show a little less opposition to the release of the contaminated water. But let's talk about how the South Korean current government is going to address this. What has it done so far? Aran, you have more on this.
Sure. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that it has been requesting information from Japan regarding the release of treated radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant and analyzing the information. In his response to a question about whether an independent review process is going on between South Korea and Japan, an official from the Foreign Ministry told reporters Thursday that the South Korean government will continue to review the relevant data through continued scientific and technical consultations with Japan. The review process on the treated radioactive water by the South Korean government is a separate process from the monitoring going on by the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA has formed a fact-finding team comprising experts from 11 countries, including South Korea, to carry out safety reviews to ensure that Japan's discharge of the water is in line with the international safety standards and poses no harm to public health and the environment. On top of the IAEA reviews, South Korea and Japan have held director-level bilateral meetings on this issue as well. The two governments are said to have recognized the need for joint scientific investigation. There's also a possibility that this issue can be discussed at the upcoming South Korea-Japan summit on May 7th. The Foreign Ministry official also said to reporters that it is difficult to say whether the issue of Fukushima contaminated water will be included in the agenda during Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's visit to Korea, as agendas have yet to be decided and are still being discussed between the two countries. However, he emphasized that the South Korean government will make efforts to ensure that Korean people can actually feel the positive results as South Korean-Japan relation continues to normalize.
Yeah, we've even seen when President Yoon Suk-yeol made his visit to Tokyo back in March, and there was certain things that I think he didn't go into details, and one of the ones was, again, on the release of the contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear power plant, and what he always basically said was, listen, we just want some transparency, let's get some scientific information that it is safe. But the consensus, and it is interesting the way that the IAEA report goes on, and a lot of people are saying the IAEA, although the IAEA has been relatively optimistic that this contaminated water that's going to be released is going to be safe for everybody, some other experts are saying that no. We've also had a nuclear expert on the show before who said that he is very concerned with the release of the wastewater there. But we'll have to see again. I mean, that is going to be one of the issues I think we'll eventually have to discuss during the summit talks between the two leaders this Sunday. In the meantime, let's talk about that Washington Declaration once again. It's been under the spotlight, has been mentioned by many South Korean officials, but also North Korean officials in the U.S. as well. In fact, the South Korean ambassador to the United States, Choi Yun-dong, sincerely praised the adoption of the new declaration, while the North Korean state media, KCNA, of course, heavily criticized the newest commitment between the two allies in South Korea and the United States. I mean, Hannah, let's face it, there's going to be obviously two very contrasting reactions
Obviously, yes.
from North Korea and the United States. So why don't we listen to the differences in their reaction?
Okay, so first, South Korea. So the South Korean ambassador to the United States, Cho Yeon-dong, said on Thursday that the Washington Declaration announced by the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. is an upgrade version of the Mutual Defense Treaty between the two countries in a talk at the CSIS, a U.S. think tank. The Washington Declaration is an unprecedented declaration that the U.S. adopted with another country, he said. He added that we have created a new mechanism called the Nuclear Consultative Group, which is very exceptional. He also added that although some have compared it to NATO's NPG, it is seen as an evolution of a mutual defense treaty signed in 1953, and it reflects the current security environment in South Korea as well. The two leaders also agreed to strengthen the deployment of nuclear assets on the Korean Peninsula. Cho added that it is really also very important. Meanwhile, North Korea has continued to condemn the Washington Declaration, which calls for the need to expand North Korea's war deterrence. The KCNA has published articles criticizing the Washington Declaration for 5 consecutive days, citing foreign and South Korean media. The news agency said, citing Chinese media, that the United States is seeking to form a southern triangle with Japan and South Korea, which would start a new Cold War in Northeast Asia. This would increase the risk of confrontation in the region. It also added that the U.S. should try to end the war and sign a peace treaty instead of increasing joint military drills to prevent North Korea from using nuclear and missile weapons. Pyongyang also hinted at its intention to demand that the U.S. recognize North Korea's nuclear program and regime while condemning the defensive U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises. Cho reacted to Pyongyang's stance by saying that North Korea's strong condemnation of the Washington Declaration shows how powerful and effective it is. I hope North Korea has a clear understanding of the nature of the Washington Declaration, which is basically extended deterrence and defense, and it is not aggressive at all. He added, the U.S. and South Korean leaders have made it clear that they are open to dialogue and diplomacy with North Korea. He said, noting that they, North Korea, can come back at any time and the choice is theirs.
Yeah, technically the word deterrence is defensive in nature, right? I mean, you are technically ramping up like the offenses, but that's only for defensive purposes. But it is interesting that, I mean, what was this? Citing a Chinese media, the U.S. should end the war, sign a peace treaty instead of increasing joint military drills to prevent North Korea from using nuclear weapons and missile weapons. The thing is, I mean, would have been easier. I think that was the reason why a peace treaty was not able. We were so close back. What is it? That we had the Singapore summit, right, and then we had the Hanoi summit. And the thing that fell out was the fact that North Korea eventually they weren't willing to give up their nuclear program. They did want the sanctions first. I think that was the reason why it fell out. They said lift the sanctions first, and then we'll get rid of the nuclear weapons. There has been many cases early on in the 90s where North Korea decided initially that they were going to end their nuclear program, and they started reactivating their nuclear program. So there's a whole lot of trust issues. So I'm not sure if it's really as simple as just the U.S. wanting to end the war and sign a peace treaty. There needs to be a reciprocal measure from North Korea, but we unfortunately haven't seen any of that. We're going to now talk about something that we briefly touched upon yesterday. We talked about the quote-unquote alleged assassination attempt on Russian President Vladimir Putin. There was no clear-cut evidence that Ukraine was actually behind this, but Russia seems to continue to intensify their criticism against the U.S. over Ukraine now. We had that drone incident, but we're going to get more on what exactly happened with that very I don't know if you could call it a failed drone attack. It kind of exploded, but Arirang, walk us through the details of what exactly happened there.
Sure. Russia has accused the U.S. of being behind what it says was a drone attack on the Kremlin on Wednesday and an assassination attempt against President Vladimir Putin. Moscow's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said on Thursday, "We understand well that the decision about such terror attacks are taken not in Kyiv but in Washington, suggesting that the United States coordinated the attack and the Ukrainian government was just implementing the decisions made in Washington." Peskov did not provide any evidence to his claims, nor additional details regarding the alleged attack, saying that the information would be released later. In Washington, the National Security Council's coordinator for strategic communications, John Kirby, pushed back on Peskov's accusation, calling it a ludicrous claim. Mr. Kirby said that one thing I can tell you for certain is that the United States was not involved in this incident in any way contrary to Mr. Peskov's lies. He continued to emphasize that the U.S. had nothing to do with the incident and Peskov is just lying there, pure and simple. He also told reporters that he didn't know whether the alleged drone attack was a false flag operation, but he did say that it fit Putin's narrative that Russia is under existential threat from the West. A false flag operation means an act committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and pinning blame on another party. Ukraine also denied any involvement in the incident, with officials saying that it's a way for Russia to justify its own military aggression and is a signal that Russia is planning a large-scale terrorist attack against Ukraine in the coming days.
Let me briefly explain what a false flag operation is, because I have been a victim of false flag operation many times when I was young. It's like my little brother wanted to get me in trouble, and he would kind of like make it look like he got hurt, and he would hurt himself and then be like, he did it. Basically place the blame on me. That would be the simplest way to put a false, defined false flag operation. But then the thing is right now Russia is they initially pinned the blame on Ukraine, right? They said Ukraine was responsible for this attempted assassination. But hold on, let's spice it up here. It was Washington who told Ukraine to go into this assassination attempt. It does sound, Russia has done a lot of these false flag operations in the past. And I would say, again, it would be very, very dumb for Ukraine to try to kill Vladimir Putin. Let's just put it at that, because we know that if there's any real attempt at an assassination on Vladimir Putin, that Moscow is going to respond with a huge retaliatory attack on Ukraine. And Ukraine certainly cannot afford to do such thing. But it seems that because Moscow really truly believes that that drone attack was an actual assassination attempt, they did take a retaliatory measure against Ukraine the very following day. Let's talk more about this, Aran.
Sure. Following the purported drone attack on Wednesday, Russia fired 24 combat drones at Ukraine early on Thursday, striking a university campus in the Black Sea city of Odessa and attacking the capital, Kyiv, for the third time in 4 days. Russia has stepped up its attacks as Ukraine prepares for a counteroffensive to try to retake Russian-occupied land in the south and east. Russian shelling in the frontline southern region of Kherson killed at least 23 civilians on Wednesday. A Ukrainian Air Force colonel said Russia's military was using kamikaze drones, which fly towards their target before blowing up, to weaken Ukrainian air defense system. He said Russia knows the drones will be destroyed, and we are currently destroying 80% of them, and it is exhausting Ukrainian air defense. Also, the city administrator in Kyiv said that missiles, probably ballistic missiles, had been used in the attack, but were shut down along with all the drones over the capital. Ballistic missiles are difficult to shoot down, and their downing could indicate that Ukraine used sophisticated Western-supplied air defense systems. Kyiv authorities said that enemies' aerial objects have been down over three districts in the center of the capital, and that debris had fallen around 10 buildings. As a result of the falling debris, parked cars and the road surface were partially damaged. In total, Ukrainian air defense shut down 18 out of 24 Russian kamikaze drones. Out of 15 drones fired at Odessa, 12 were brought down, but 3 struck a university campus. Russian drones attacked Kyiv again on the evening of the same day, and the city authorities had declared an alert for Kyiv and the surrounding area.
So this is, again, if, again, there's no evidence as whether or not Ukraine was behind the quote-unquote the assassination attempt on Putin, but again, it does seem like they're going to Russia is going to justify their recent attack because Ukraine had carried out this assassination attempt. Now, if there was a real assassination attempt, there would have been a much bigger attack on Ukraine than the drone attacks that we saw. But again, another unfortunate thing that we've been seeing time and time out, what Russia does is, although in the very beginning of their Russian invasion, they said that they're only targeting, military facilities, but come on now, a university campus is not a military. I mean, and this is not the first time they've attacked schools. They've done kindergartens, they've done hospitals, they've done other schools, elementary school, they've done shopping centers. And so, again, this is exactly what Russia has been doing for over a year now. And again, we'll have to see whether or not there's any sort of developments on that quote-unquote alleged assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin. But in the meantime, we'll talk about energy prices, because it's on a freeze right now, but we knew that eventually the price hike was going to come. In fact, second quarter electricity rate hike is what we're looking. It has been suspended by a month, and attention is turned to how much more households have to pay depending on the size of the hike here. I guess a hike, if it's small enough, will be okay, but if it's going to be big, it's certainly going to impact the inflation, which is sort of on a downhill trend right now. But Hannah, you have more on this.
So the government and the ruling party, which had previously raised electricity rates by 13.11 per kilowatt hour in the first quarter of this year, are reportedly considering a modest increase within the single digits per kilowatt hour this month, taking into account inflationary concerns and public opinion on rate hikes. According to a general survey conducted by the Energy Economics Research Institute in 2020, the average electricity bill per household is currently around 33,000 won for single-person households, 45,000 won for two-person, 47,000 won for three-person, and 48,000 won for four-person households. In case of a 7-won rate hike, there would be an increase of around 2,000 won per household. A 10-won increase would mean that households are expected to pay between 2,000 and 3,000 won more for electricity. If the increase is 13 won, as it was in the first quarter, the additional burden will be even greater. A four-person household will pay an additional 4,000 won, just shy of 5,000 won for electricity. The electricity rate hike in the second quarter is expected to provide some breathing room for KEPCO instead, which is piling up 4 billion won a day in interest payments after posting an operating loss of 32.6 trillion won last year. An industry official told Yonhap News Agency that until now, domestic electricity prices have not reflected the rise in global energy prices, adding that KEPCO has been supplying electricity at extremely low prices. In the meantime, KEPCO is considering other cost-cutting moves in response to high demands from the government and the ruling party to prepare self-rescue measures before raising electricity prices.
I mean, I've said this before, but I really think, I don't know, actually, how much does my electricity bills come out? I know it comes out pretty big during the summer times because we're always blasting the AC and things like that. But would you say that an additional, let's say, like even 3,000, 4,000 won is a lot for a monthly electricity bill? Do you guys think?
Well, the thing is, I'm not really paying my electricity bills. It's actually my parents. So
paying.
I don't know if that's a lot, though.
It's a burden. You think 3,000, 4,000 extra? Really?
It's a cup of coffee, right?
But it's only like 3,000 won.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? I'm trying to kind of see how big it is. I mean, because Arirang says it's a burden, and I guess maybe 3,000-4,000 depending on the household. I don't think it's a whole lot. I still think that Korean electricity bills are a little bit too cheap, and that's been the problem, right? And so we've had some of our listeners from, like, let's say, like in the UK or in Germany. They said it's a lot bigger, but you're right. I mean, I guess our producer is sending me a message. He says, you're right. For maybe some citizens out there, even 3,000-4,000 could be a burden, right? And so, but a lot of people have been saying is that KEPCO still doesn't charge enough for their electricity bill. I think that's something that the ruling party has mentioned in the past as well. And so, if they really need to come out of the red, I mean, because they've been bleeding money right now. KEPCO's been bleeding money for a long time. And so a lot of people are saying, well, is this a sacrifice that we need to make where a 10-won increase may not be enough? Because the last thing you want to see is, again, KEPCO bleeding money. It's going to impact us eventually. eventually. But we'll have to see moving forward here. Discussions also on the ongoing issue regarding the housing rental fraud scam, right? We talked about this where thousands of people have been impacted by this across the nation here. The South Korean government announced last month that it's going to be making a new special law to support victims of these fraud cases. And it does appear that more details are being added to this new law here. Aran, you have the details of this.
Sure. The South Korean government has recently released a plan to make a special law to support victims of house rental scam. Still, the details of the law are being discussed right now, but there are some criticisms about the law being too ambiguous and having overly strict criteria about who can be deemed a victim. The controversial part is whether tenants who didn't get their security deposit back due to 깡통 전세 can be benefited from this law. 깡통 전세 is a term referring to a situation where the deposit for a house become higher than the market value of the house itself, which makes it difficult for the landlord to find a new tenant or return deposit money to the current tenant. And today, during the review on the new law in the National Assembly, the Ministry of Justice indicated that tenants who are unable to receive their deposit money back due to 깡통 전세 can also be protected by the special law. However, the government suggested that the special law should only be applied in cases where a large number of tenants have been affected, because it is difficult to justify protecting a single victim of 깡통 전세, while victims of other types of fraud scams, such as phishing scams, are not protected. Additionally, the special law may be applied in situations where there are multiple houses involved, because it is likely that the landlord can compensate any losses for tenants if only one or two houses are involved in case of a drop in house prices. However, the government's position is that if the landlord leases houses to the extent that he or she is impossible to return deposit in case of housing prices fall, the landlord's intention of fraud will be recognized and his act may be considered intentional fraud. But the intention of fraud part is what makes the special law pretty ambiguous, because it is hard to verify whether the landlord had fraudulent intention or not. So some members of the National Assembly's Land and Transportation Committee said that while expanding the scope of the special law is a step in the right direction, they're still concerned because it is difficult to distinguish what is considered fraudulent intention and what is not. Also, there is a concern that some victims may be excluded from the law, which can raise the issue of fairness among victims.
Yeah, I want to kind of explain to you guys how this quote-unquote 깡통 전세 works. So 깡통 basically means like can, okay, like a can and then 전세. So what happens, empty can, I should say. Mm-hmm. So what happens is, let's say 전세 price, someone was able to get 전세 for, let's say, about 400,000 US dollars, okay? And so we've been seeing the 전세 prices actually go down nowadays. And also real estate prices are also on a downhill trend right now, where, I mean, let's face it, a lot of people, we saw some of the highest real estate prices in the past few years now, and now it's going on a decline because the interest rates are lower. So unfortunately, what a lot of people, what these the homeowners do is when they take the 400,000 won, what they're supposed to be doing is put it into the bank and then feed off the interest, right? And so anytime that the 2 years is up, or let's say 4 years is up, whatever your contract is for, they're supposed to return that 400,000 US dollars to whoever put that deposit in. But unfortunately, for many of the homeowners, what they do is they use that 400,000 US dollars and they put it into another real estate, I guess, they buy another house or something like that. And they flip it basically. And so when the person who is now the tenant wants to leave, wants to move, right? They said, oh, I saved enough money, now I'm going to buy a house. They need that 400,000 US dollars. But the homeowner they need to basically make that money back. What they have to do is find another 전세 person or even sell it. But if the property goes down, the price of the 전세 or the property or the value of the house goes down, they're not going to be able to make the difference in the prices. And so they basically go, we don't have the money. we have to find someone that comes in, and oftentimes they try to find another tenant with the same 전세 price at $400,000. But when the market is down, they're unable to do so. And so unless they're able to find another tenant, they're unable to return that money. And so is that considered a fraudulent, does that have a fraudulent intention or not, is the big sort of debate. So again, there is a good chance that people are going to be, brought down by this law if they don't, expand the scope of this. But nevertheless, we're going to talk about another scandal this time. Prosecutors are now, of course, investigating the suspected case of large-scale stock manipulation. They have secured detailed transaction data for the stocks allegedly used by price manipulators. We talked about Tao Kium Group Executive Chairman Kim Ik-lee. He stepped down from his position on Thursday following suspicions that he was involved with stock manipulation. They were saying that right before the big drop, he sold off all his stocks. So now there's a lot of red flags in regards to this. So Hannah, you have more on this.
Yes, so Kim Ik-lee, the chairman of Tao Kium Group, said in a press conference on Thursday that I will resign from the chairman position at Tao Kium Group and the board seat at Kium Securities. During the conference, Kim apologized for the massive unloading of Tao Data shares, which may have harmed retail investors, and vowed to fully cooperate with financial authorities and investigative agencies during future investigations. Kim said he will donate the entire amount of 60.5 billion won, which was gained from selling 1.4 million shares of Tao Data. He hasn't yet decided on how to return the money, but he plans to use it to help foster a healthy capital market. Tao Data, among 8 other companies, share prices plummeted, which was offset by a large share buyback and cancellation by the company on April 24th. La Dok-yeon, one of the 2 figures involved in the latest stock manipulation and also the head of a Seoul-based investment advisory firm, insisted Kim Ik-lee is the key man behind the latest stock scandal as he went on a selling spree of Tao Data shares worth tens of billions of won shortly before their value plummeted last month. Ra is suspected of driving the stock manipulation, but he denies, of course, the allegations and has expressed his intention of suing Kim for damages, citing his suspiciously timed stock sales. Kium Securities also shared its plan to file a suit against Ra for spreading false information. Well, now, so it remains to be seen which side is making false claims, with both sides completely denying the stock manipulation allegations.
To be honest with you, if you're like the CEO of an exchange company, you should not be allowed to trade. There are cases where if you're, for example, like in South Korea, if you work in finances, in the financial sectors, you're not allowed to trade stocks. And I know a buddy of mine who went into finances, and he had to sell off all his stocks because he was not allowed to do any of this stuff. But that holds true with like U.S. lawmakers as well. There's been a lot of people saying that U.S. lawmakers should not be able to trade stocks and things like that. They might be able to get like inside information. But
of course,
what we're also seeing nowadays with this whole Kium exchange fiasco is that a lot of people are deleting their Kium exchanges. They're selling off their stocks, and now they're saying they're not going to use Kium anymore. And I don't know what my son is doing because my son uses this exchange. But
wow. Your son is like 4 years old.
He has stocks.
Oh.
He's rich. He's richer than me. Let's just put it at that. Speaking of which, Children's Day today. It was my son was very excited. He's finally old enough to know what Children's Day is today. He woke me up this morning saying it's Children's Day. He wants his present. It is a national holiday here. Almost everyone has the days off. There's a lot of events happening, festivals. Usually on days like this, we have the amusement parks and the zoos and all the places packed, but that's actually been like completely empty today because of the nationwide rain. But unfortunate for the children. But Aran, tell us about the Children's Day scene that took place today.
Sure. On Children's Day today, which also marks the beginning of a long holiday, various events were held nationwide despite the rainy weather. Indoor venues such as sports centers and museums were bustling with families enjoying Children's Day events. Kids' cafes, department stores, and aquariums also saw a steady stream of visitors. The Children's Day event held at the Halla Gymnasium in the Jeju Sports Complex was crowded with children playing and having fun despite being indoors. At the Namdong Gymnasium in Incheon, a dance team performed before the children's choir took the stage to sing Children's Day songs. The National Jeonju Museum held various events such as treasure hunting, traditional cultural experiences, and folk games in booths in front of the main building, as well as taekwondo demonstrations and magic and bubble performances in the auditorium. In Gangneung, a wide range of programs including mime, magic, street performances, balloon art experiences, and family gardening were offered at the Gangneung Sports Complex.
Tell you, kids have it good these days. It ended with just jjajangmyeon for me, I remember when I was a little bit younger. But the South Korean government, by the way, they're trying to legislate a new bill that respects children's rights. Walk us through the details of this act, Aran.
Right. The South Korean government will start drafting a new bill for children this year with an aim of passing it within the next year. And children are actively participating in the legislative process and expressing their demands. According to the Ministry of Health and Welfare and the National Assembly, lawmakers Yang Geum-hee of the People Power Party and Kang Hoon-sik of the Democratic Party each proposed a basic act on children. According to the ministry, the new law will recognize children as individuals in their own rights, and it aims to make up for the shortcomings in the current child-related laws. Currently, there are several child-related laws in Korea, including the Child Welfare Act and the Act on the Prevention of Child Abuse, and they are mostly concentrated on protecting and educating children. However, many countries are now viewing children as individuals who can exercise their own rights, not just the subject of protection. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, an international agreement on the minimum standards that all children should enjoy, recommends that each country have a child basic law. However, no law in Korea recognizes children as individuals with rights, even though the country ratified the UN Convention in 1991.
You know, I'm gonna get in big trouble with this eventually because, you know, with the rise of a lot of these social media platforms, YouTube, TikTok, and all sorts of stuff, I'm sure some of our listeners have seen my Instagram. I have like 90% of his like goofy pictures of my son, and like some of them are very embarrassing as well. Now, apparently, there's some issues with videos featuring kids at a very young age that might be potentially very embarrassing when they grow up. And now they're talking about this, and this might be a big problem later on. So Hannah, tell us more about this.
So as mentioned, there are like online platforms like YouTube and TikTok, and this eventually has become a huge part of children's lives. So it's not uncommon to see videos featuring children as creators or guests. However, due to the nature of online content, which is difficult to control and regulate in advance, the use of children in videos may inadvertently result in violations of children's rights. While the kids in videos may seem cute from an adult's point of view, it can be uncomfortable or embarrassing to watch as the child grows older. Even videos of your kid's childhood that you may upload on these social media platforms or video streaming platforms may be problematic later on. Once uploaded, videos can be shared, spread, and difficult to remove completely, so parents should be extra cautious and consider whether it is something that children and teens would not find offensive or embarrassing later in life.
I'm just going to mention this very quickly because we're running out of time. Producers, content creators can be punished up to 5 years in prison or a fine of 50 million won if they force a child to appear in the content despite the child's expressed desire not to do so. My kid's going to sue me later on. I'm going to have to delete my Instagram account is what I think is going to happen. Guys, thank you very much for coming in on this Children's Day. I know it's rainy out there. I hope you guys get back home safe. Have a safe weekend. We'll see you guys again next week.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.